Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. These about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Travis Scott, titled Rodeo. Have to be honest with you all, I wasn't planning on doing this review. See, one of the big positives for Billboard Breakdown, for me at least, is I can get a few weeks or months of advance warning about albums coming down the pipe that might not be to my preferences based off of their lead-off singles. And sure, that's far from an exact science, but more often than not, if I'm hearing your lead-off single and it's over 7 minutes of decently produced but completely empty luxury rap with Future and 2 Chainz, I'm not exactly inclined to look up your debut album. That's probably better for the both of us. And that's where I thought it would end with me and Travis Scott, Houston producer turned rapper affiliated with Kanye West and T.I. He became known for his oppressively dark and bleak production, which I guess I could appreciate, but I kept going back to the old adage I have with luxury rap. If the beats are so dark and dreary, where it's clear that nobody's having any fun and completely runs counter to the message in the lyrics, why in the nine hells did I buy into that? It wasn't as if Travis Scott was a rapper worth caring about. This isn't ASAP Rocky here, which you at least expect some competently structured flows or some interesting description or insight on occasion. On a technical level, Travis Scott just didn't impress me beyond the very basics. And when I took a look at his credits for this upcoming album, I didn't know what to think. I mean, sure, he had some respectable names behind him like Pharrell and DJ Dye, but he only had a couple of production credits himself. In other words, it looked like he was de-emphasizing the talents that made him famous in the first place for those that wouldn't help him stand out in a lineup of any other rappers. On top of that, his features list immediately struck me as questionable. I already mentioned Future and 2 Chainz, but Quavo from Migos, Young Thug, Justin Bieber, Chief Keef, and Sway Lee from Ray Shrimmer? But I thought, okay, maybe with him stepping away from the production boards, it might not be as cavernous or dreary. It might fit the subject matter a little bit better. Even though the lead-off single and the album's running time of over an hour did not inspire any confidence here. But hey, I'm willing to try new things. I've been looking for this brand of ignorant hip-hop to really work with me sometime this year, so how was the rodeo? Well, honestly, I'm not seeing much on this album that sets Travis Scott apart from the meeting midway between Future and ASAP Rocky with a splash of Kanye and Migos on top. A slice of unbridled, washed-out hedonism and swampy, cavernous production. And sure, I know better at this point to expect anything that's all that lyrical, but the more I tried to dredge through the depths of this album for something that was interesting, the less I found anything that really gripped me altogether. I don't know, I spent most of this year trying to dig through multiple sides of this more debauched, hedonistic side of hip-hop, and I do reckon that Travis Scott might come a little bit closer to winning me over by blending a little bit more grit into the faux opulent darkness. But as much as I can respect good production, eventually there needs to be something that grounds it in terms of its content or personality, otherwise I'm just gonna forget about it. In this case, it's only pretty much the basics, only decent at best. Now the second charge I made here about personality is admittedly a fair bit more steep, as Travis Scott, at first glimpse, does seem to have his own unique brand of heavily distorted and auto-tuned vocals, midway between Kanye's 808s and Heartbreak and Future. And for the most part, doesn't really sound that bad, balancing out the rougher edges of southern hip-hop with fragments of a shattered elegance with more of a melodic presentation. And for some of the hooks, it can be pretty damn potent, especially when boosted by the walls of roaring distortion with guitars and synth, make it sound so much more imposing than it naturally is, make it seem more cohesive and a little bit wilder. It actually sounds pretty damn good. And to give him further credit, Travis Scott isn't a bad rapper, very far from a great one in terms of his punchlines or his storytelling or anything close to interesting new content. We'll come back to that, but he's got flows that can connect, even if he does rhyme the same words with itself way too much to really connect with me. And if he stuck with that more imposing tone, he might have won some more points, but the constant varying of the layers of pitch correction and reverb piled on his voice, all those effects, means that it's hard to get a definitive picture on Travis Scott's unique personality. I mean, I can hear his voice, it's somewhat distinctive, but it can feel like a facsimile of other artists he's working with on this track, a little bit chameleon-like to me, and that does bug me. And really, it's hit or miss when you come to some of these guest stars, because you know you're running into trouble when the most memorable and arguably the best credited verses come from Juicy J, 2 Chainz, The Weeknd, and Justin Bieber. In this case, the big surprise is probably Bieber himself, who proves surprisingly decent on the half rap, half croon that nearly everybody's trying to emulate on this album. The rest are memorable simply because they're being competent mostly. Juicy J's hedonism, 2 Chainz being wildly over the top and kind of funny, which really runs contrary to the downbeat tone that Future's aimless bitching about Sierra brings in the second verse. Get over her already. And The Weeknd Weeknd actually sounds pretty visceral against this brand of production. It's got some real teeth to it, sometimes a little bit more teeth than he had on Beauty Behind the Madness. The rest, in terms of some of the backing singers, I really did love Casey Hill's Anya Like Will We voice on 90210, and Tori Moy sounds great against the Pharrell-produced Rollick of Flying High, but beyond that, Young Thug is less interesting or exciting than normal against the drearier tones of Maria I'm Drunk. I really think he needs brighter instrumentals to be really tolerable with me, maybe something that's a little bit more jazz-inspired. Sway Lee is actually somewhat listenable in Nightcrawler, a lot more than usual, mostly because he's more anonymous than ever. Chief Keef and Quavo from Migos do their below-average thing, and Future is Future. He's insufferable. But you know, the absolute worst is Kanye West here. Not only does the beat do nothing against a decent Jimi Hendrix sample, Kanye's howling vocals on Piss on Your Grave sounds like a reject from Yeezus that honestly should have stayed rejected. Like it or not, dude, you're not MC Ride. You don't have enough bass in your voice to really pull this off. And as much as your instrumental kind of reminds me a bit of an off-brand Death Grips, it's nowhere near as raw or abrasive as it needs to be to make this sound palpable or impressive. But to be fair, I'm looking for the one element to recommend off of this album, it would definitely be the instrumentation and the production. I'll give Travis Scott this. He's got a keen eye for production that's swampy and bass heavy, but still maintaining enough melody to remain catchy and undeniably sinister. I dug the choppy buzz fragments that collapse towards the inwards of the blackness or pornography, the flute against the filthy beat on Wasted, and that great transition from bass-heavy guitar rumbles to the more soulful, almost symphonic keyboards and skittering hand claps on 90210. Hell, the majority of the change-ups and transitions on this album are handled really well, with a mixed step line for deeper layers while still maintaining all that atmosphere. And even though it's not exactly handled great, I like the damp jungle feel the first half of Maria I'm Drunk, or the menacing bass against the drippy pianos or choppy beat of I Can Tell. It's not always great. Nightcrawler feels like a few too many buzzing layers are piled on. They really pile on top of the vocals. And the wispy synth tones on Impossible just felt atonal and really grated on my nerves. Same with the second half of Maria If I'm Drunk, if I'm being honest. But considering the actual crispness of the hi-hats and the beats is cranked way down, it does allow this album to have a pretty impressive sense of flow behind it. Hell, even the songs I have little use for, like 3500, use the strings and the guitars incredibly well to add some swell to the song, and it's got a pretty potent hook. In fact, most of the hooks on this album are pretty damn decent. I'm definitely willing to concede, if you throw this album on during a party, if you just want to get stoned or spark up a darker move, this album, Rodeo, can definitely deliver on that promise. But now, we gotta talk about lyrics. And folks, if we're looking for an area where this album just falls completely flat for me, it's here. At least A$AP Rocky tried to venture into different subject matter on his last album, At Long Last A$AP, to make it stand out. This album is a selection of darker leaning club bangers about sex, drugs, screwing your girl in the butt, and supposedly breaking boundaries, the latter of which I find incredibly hard to buy because it's not exactly Travis Scott is tracing much new ground here lyrically, especially considering he didn't produce a lot of this album. The most depth we get out of the lyrics is courtesy of T.I. and The Weeknd. The former operates as an unofficial narrator that sketches out Travis Scott's choice to take the plunge into this life that he knows could lead him down a dark path, and yet it's his only way out of the hood. It's the only way he can become successful. Much like The Weeknd, it's trying to walk the line between outright hedonistic glorification and treating it like the necessary evil to survive that ultimately damns him in the end. With the addendum that unless we're willing to take the same steps, we shouldn't judge him for his actions. And you know what? I do like that T.I. leaves it pretty open-ended by saying that it's not clear whether or not Travis Scott's choice will pay off for him, whether or not he will survive that rodeo. And let me give him credit. This is a pretty compelling framework for this sort of hedonism. It could work if Travis Scott wasn't a completely boring MC lyrically. We barely get fragments of insight beyond your typical swaggering drug and club anthems, or maybe some songs about to come up, and most of those are completely lyrically interchangeable, lacking in punchlines or even memorable phrases, good or bad, that stand out. It feels so recycled, and it highlights T.I.'s monologues as less insight and more just thin excuses trying to add the trappings of depth where it really isn't there lyrically or thematically. I just get so little from it here. So yeah, in the end, you know, I wanted to like this album. I really did, because there are songs that I liked. But at the end of the day, Rodeo tumbles towards the same category a lot of this less lyrical, more ignorant hip-hop does. Taking itself way too seriously and dark these days, and with not enough interesting bars to back it up. Yeah, I know you're not gonna care about the lyrics or the themes at a strip club or a party where this gets turned up, but outside of that environment, what more does this give you? What other places could you play this and get enjoyment out of it? And as I said in the past, shallower music can connect if the performer has more charisma, or at least some wit to back up some good production. You have some bars that string together with some content that might be interesting on a shallow level, but sadly I'm not seeing any of that here. For me, it's a strong 5 out of 10 and only a recommendation if you're more into this sort of sound. You know what? I completely understand that there's an audience for this. Maybe that's just not me. And you know what? I think I'm okay with that. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Just, okay, you guys, you want me to talk about Halsey Badlands? Here it is. It sounds like Lorde and Lana Del Rey mixed together with no prominent melodies and lyrics that are just plain embarrassing. She has no presence behind the microphone and she bores me to tears. Please guys, stop requesting it. I have nothing really to say about it that isn't gonna piss you off. Any sort of review makes me feel bad because I don't want to do it because there's nothing to say. And any review that you guys want is not going to be the praise. And it's really too boring for me to really dig into and savage. It's just kind of mediocre. And that's all I've really got to say about it. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time. Man, I can't take no more of this lifestyle.